Welcome to Business Unmuted. Thanks to our sponsor Virtue Motors, one of the UK's largest motor retailers, representing some of the world's best manufacturers of vans, cars, motorcycles. Check out its website at virtuemotors.com. I'm Graham Robb and I've owned Recognition PR for around 35 years this year, with 75 clients in multiple sectors across the UK, and between them they have a turnover of about £6 billion and employ 30,000 people. So we're in the front line of the business community and perfectly placed to discuss the economic climate. And joining me to do just that, in the studio we've got Nicky Jolley, Managing Director of HR Today in Darlington, and we have Darren Winter, Company Director at Duco Digital, an award-winning professional digital marketing agency based in the Tees Valley, Redcar. Down the line we have broadcaster and commentator Emily Carver, who can often be heard on GB News. She's also formerly of the Institute of Economic Affairs. Well, Emily, let's start with you. I'm going to give you a great big picture to paint on, a big canvas to paint on. What do you think, after a few weeks of the new year now and a few bits of data emerging, what do you think the picture of the economy is?
Well, it's hard to be too optimistic. I mean, if you want to look on the bright side, it does seem that inflation at least has peaked and it's now on its way down. So that's something to be happy about, and that's something that businesses should be ever so slightly optimistic about. However, we've also seen that the government is borrowing at a record amount once again. That's due to the energy support schemes and also interest on government debt. So hopefully that will also be on its way down very soon if global energy prices go down and if those interest payments can be spread over many years, which I believe they can be. I'm disappointed. I've seen that in terms of our tax competitiveness in this country, we are falling well down the league tables from this year. I believe we're now going to be 30th out of 38 OECD countries, down from number 5, which is pretty terrible. I think the government has made a mistake in wanting to raise corporation tax and many other taxes as well. But that's a big one when it comes to business, of course. And I think that will have a very damaging effect on the economy going forward. I'm also concerned about reports recently that many people with quite a bit of cash or with high salaries are leaving the country. A lot of young people also seem to have given up on living here, which is pretty bleak. I hope that people will stay here. I think there's lots to be proud of in this country, and there's a lot going on, but it does seem like the mood may be going in that direction, not least because of housing costs and the cost of living in general in this country, always on the rise, it seems. So a mixed picture, I'd say.
Okay, well, I think that's a balanced view. I'm going to conjure up the inner optimism in me. Conjure it up and just say, look, also, we've got virtual full employment, and also, although the government's borrowing obscene amounts of money, like they make your teeth itch, the amount that they're borrowing, it's less money than it was predicted to be.
Yes.
Which is a shock to the system. And also, everyone was saying we'd be in recession now, and it's quite possible we won't be, because the sales over Christmas were a bit better than everybody thought. And also, I keep bumping into people in business who are saying, well, my business isn't doing too badly and I'm planning to grow. And it seems to me that if only the politicians and the commentariat would just get this, that no matter what the picture of the economy from the data from last year or the Office of National Statistics or the Purchasing Managers Index, whatever is published in the data, the future is depending on us, isn't it? It's actually depending on our hard work and enterprise. You know, there was a quote published from Margaret Thatcher in one of the newspapers over the weekend that said, for everyone looking on the horizon for the economic upturn, if you're in business, you may be the upturn.
Well, this is what I wrote in an article the other day for The Independent, actually, is that Rishi Sunak and the cabinet know full well that economic growth will not come from their decisions necessarily, but it will come from, as you say, the hard work and graft of people. So they need to make it as easy as possible for people to start a business, run a business, employ people and turn a good profit.
Yeah, I know I've stretched every sinew there to be positive. I think you give me a bit of credit for that. But on the negative, there are some things that the government needs to perhaps address itself to. Some are practical I've bumped into a number of firms that have COVID loans recently, and there's a bit of worry about this because the COVID guarantee, the government guarantees the COVID loans. They say, well, you took the COVID loan, if all goes wrong, we'll guarantee. The government guarantees run out in December this year for some of these COVID loans, and they need to be refinanced. So I know a business that took out more than 20 million of COVID loans, has paid off half of them, or will have by the end of the year, and will need to refinance the other half by adding it onto their existing borrowing. But the bank is saying, well, hang on, the economy's not growing quite so much, interest rates are higher, and it's not as affordable. A bit like trying to refinance your student loan with your mortgage. The building society is saying no, which it probably would. But perhaps the government needs to just have another look-see at the COVID loans. What do you think, Emily, and what do you think on that, Nicky? Emily first.
Well, I think it's going to be extremely difficult for businesses with all the costs that are going up at the moment. If COVID loans, the government probably, if what you say is true and people are really struggling and it doesn't seem particularly fair in the way that it's going forward, then perhaps that is something that the government should have another look at. We know that the government lost a huge amount of money through fraud of one kind and another. If they can make it easier for businesses who are showing that they want to repay the money and they are repaying the money, but they need to have it in a slightly less onerous way, then perhaps that's a good thing.
I hear some commentators saying some of the cost of living crisis should be paid to workers from profits, but profits being eroded by, I've just said COVID loans, interest rates, they're being eroded by high energy costs, they're being eroded in some cases by minimum wage. A lot of businesses I've noticed in the north, as part of the consequence of us levelling up the north, the business rate review has resulted in higher business rates. And those are things that are slightly outside of business control, never mind the actual economy. And those are the things that Jeremy Punt should be taking into account when he's looking at his taxation policy and his spending policy. I haven't let you have a say on this, Nicky. Let's bring you in.
I mean, I do think businesses need more support. We've had a lot of support and now it's kind of grabbing and taking it all back. But they need to think of the bigger picture. We are the ones that are turning this around. We're the ones that are going to support the economy moving forward. And just to say you owe this money back and no, you can't borrow, well, where does that leave the company? It's not appropriate. They need to look at measures for the genuine cases. We had a brief discussion before this that if people are genuinely showing demonstration of paying this back, then they are intending to pay it back. They need a little bit more time.
Yes. So the moral hazard has to. You can't just dole it out or continue it. You've got to say, well, all right. If you want a loan extension or you want some kind of government support, you've got to demonstrate some goodwill.
Exactly.
Yes. Okay. Well, let's just extend the conversation to what you're seeing in the workplace generally, because you handle the HR, not PR. I'm PR. You're human resources. Are you getting a lot of calls from people to say, look, redundancies are on the horizon, we need to alter contracts? Is it there's still a recruitment problem?
To be fair, I anticipated redundancies. We offered training seminars before Christmas. One person turned up. We offered it again this year and we've rescheduled it. So my prediction was that at some point, ACAS did a big survey last year that said 1 in 5 companies will be making redundancies this year. We're not seeing it. I deal with 77 companies across the UK at the moment, and I would say my clients are growing. They're not shrinking. They are being cost conscious. They're absolutely putting the pressure on. Can we do anything with costs? What can we do? I don't want to go into the next tier of pricing. How can we manage that? And we're working with our clients. So definitely a cost crunch because they're getting cost increased everywhere. But I would say a good third of our clients are growing and they anticipate growth this year. So I think the outlook from businesses is this is actually a good year to grow and it's positive.
And the costs are being paid for in different ways. They'll be paid for by lower profits and lower investment, maybe.
Yes, possibly.
Yeah. Okay, Darren, what's your view? And what are you seeing in your own business?
Well, I'm just picking up from what Nicky was just saying there, that it wasn't really too long ago, so about 18 months ago, there was a massive skills shortage. And I think that's still continuing. And I think like from a company perspective is that they understand how much cost it takes to attract really good talent. So then to let it go after like 12 to 18 months, then there may be other options in the business for these people, and And if you let these people go, it's very difficult to get them back again. Yeah, and then going back to what Emily was saying, that the country as a whole is losing talent. We are losing people in digital skills. That's the sector that I'm in, and particularly technology. So, at the moment, the government brought out their AI strategy along with other governments around the world over the last 2 years. And it's very difficult now to get those going because we don't necessarily have the skills, to hand. So we're very reliant on younger people coming through from university or still trying to attract talent from overseas. But it's really difficult, not to bring the political thing, but with Brexit now to try and get people back into the UK that have these skills to enable us to have a competitive advantage.
Where we are in Tees Valley, we've got some devolution, and there's a Skills for Growth programme which does allow some quite good support on apprenticeships. Yeah. But it also strikes me that as well as having people with new skills, we as businesses need to help people to reskill.
Yes.
And it is always the case, isn't it, that businesses that are going to be on the cutting edge are going to help people reskill. In my own business, I've been banging the drum about acquiring new skills. I haven't necessarily been handing it on a plate to people. And I had an older member of my workforce come to me recently to say she's booked on a digital skills training program, an evening courses privately run, and can I pay for it? Yes, I can. There's no problem. But she was demonstrating thirst for knowledge, thirst for skills, and was looking for it, but convincing people in the workplace that they have some responsibility to find the skills they need, the employer has some responsibility to pay for the skills they need, is a bit of an uphill task, as employers have been used to sort of corporate welfare on it.
Yeah, I think it's an interesting situation, isn't it? I can see Nicky on the side probably chomping to get in on this one, so I want to take it on. But it is a partnership. It's not just about relying on the employee, it's about the business as well. Yeah. And businesses have to understand, in order to be relevant for the next 5-10 years ahead, things are changing technology-wise. They have to see that kind of path ahead, and they have to look out to their pool of talent that they've got now. Just having an empty checkbook just to buy the talent in may not be an option. Mm-hmm. So upskilling, like you say, your workforce is very, very clever.
And multi-skilling.
And multi-skilling. None of us do just one job anymore. Yeah. Everybody has to do 2 or 3 jobs. The particular skills that we're getting employees and interest from is things like business analysis, data analysis, AI, business intelligence. So this is the next form. A lot of the apprenticeships that you mentioned has all been kind of centered around digital skills. And now we're pretty competitive in that sector now compared to most countries. But the next big thing is data analysis. And it's now we've got this data, what do we do with it? How do we understand it? How do we interpret that to make business decisions? And that's a tough one.
And here you are in Teesside levelling up, because this is not a... I've been working in Teesside since 1980. That's what goodness me, it's 43 years this year I've been in the workplace. When I went into the workplace, it was as an industrial apprenticeship, and that was that. Yeah. What you've just been talking about, these jobs didn't exist. I know Nicky wants to get in, but Emily's down the line, so let's get her in first. What do you think about this whole range of things that have been thrown out in that part of the conversation? What's your thoughts on those?
Well, I think it's very interesting. I have experience of working in a big corporate PR firm where I worked for the first 2 years after I graduated. And then I worked for an MP, which obviously was a very small office. And then I worked at the Institute of Economic Affairs. And what was very interesting was, particularly during the pandemic, when people wanted to be cost conscious, as Nicky said, there was a lot of upskilling, a lot of reskilling, a lot of taking on jobs that you hadn't done before, a lot of training. It did require a lot of self-start. But as a line manager, I think it's about trying to find what makes your employees or those you manage tick. And, you can give someone something boring to do as long as they have something that they do find engaging and they find fulfilling to do at the same time. And I mean, I myself suddenly found myself editing videos and using Photoshop and all sorts of things that I'd never used before, marketing devices and all data analysis and things like that. So I think it's up to employers and of course employees to work together to come up with some kind of plan. I was looking online and there's all sorts of new trends of how people are going to be upskilling in the next year, things to do with AI, lots of online learning, of course. What I would say, I do think it is just one thing is the work from home culture. I do think is a little bit of a shame for younger people who don't benefit from the the family life benefits. And I personally have always loved working with people who have been older than me. I've enjoyed learning from them,
Skills cascade down in conversation.
Exactly, skills cascade. And you also teach people, older people might not know how to use the latest marketing tools in the way you do. And so it works both ways. So I do think it's a shame if we lose that in some companies.
Now, there are we've been talking about marketing, digital and analysis and so on that you've been talking about, Emily, but I was at a very big meeting of businesses in the North just last week. I was chairing a panel and there was well over 150 businesses in the room, and there was a fella put his hand up. He said to the panel, he said, look, I run an electrical business. I need electricians. I need people who can wire a plug. I need people who want to go through the competencies. I'll train them. I'll give them an apprenticeship, but I can't find anyone that does it because no young people want to enter it, and the people that are in it are taking early retirement. So there's a real skill shortage in some of these practical things, and that's where the crunch is. And maybe we need to import people. Now, I can make a case that is corporate welfare. I can make a case he should be training, and he would probably agree with me, apart from the fact that he doesn't have anyone to train. Emily, any view on that?
Yes, I think this is a difficult one because politicians, the sticking plaster is just to import people from outside. Yes. And of course, people who were against Brexit, this is one of the big things that they can point to as one of the failures of Brexit, the end of free movement, which did allow people to come over and take these jobs that otherwise weren't filled. However, we've also seen stats that show there are so many people of working age who are economically inactive. I refuse to believe that all of those people cannot work and will not work and won't be able to find something that they can do and can be fulfilled by. So I would like more and more emphasis to be on training people who are already here, people who are going through our school system. If our school system isn't giving people the skills they need, we need to obviously rethink and better our schooling system and so on. But I do think it's a bit of a cop-out just to bring people in from abroad while we have so many people who are economically inactive here already.
And Nicky, what's your view on this?
I would agree with that. I think the benefit system needs to be looked at. There's a lot of people on benefits that could work. I know when Michelle Cooper was in here last time, there are economic issues of getting those people to work, but I think we could reform that in the sense of if you're signing on, you have to do something, whether that's reskilling, whether that's getting out there and doing apprenticeships. I think there's a lot that could be done in that area because there are people here. I think there's a mix that could be had. There were so many topics that I could talk forever. I think furlough has made people rethink about what they want, and this working from home, I absolutely agree with you. I think it's created a culture of people not wanting to come to work. You absolutely hit the nail on the head. My team constantly talk. We were having a conversation about something last week. We couldn't literally log everything that we've had a conversation with our clients, but by being in the office and working together, we pick up on these skills and we pick up on information that you could never read on a system or monitor it or log it. And I just think this home working it's gone to the extreme, and we need to bring it back. We need the social interaction, we need the sharing of skills up and down, and I think there's a big reform that we could do. And unfortunately the home working went one way, and it allowed people to reassess. Furlough allowed people to reassess, to say, actually I don't need as much money, I don't want to work as long as I used to, and I can live on less. So that there's lots of things that we just need to try and bring back together and work on, because the resource is there. We just need to change people's mindsets, and we need to get them back into work, working together, multi-skilling. I love the fact that your employee has gone and done that and you're paying. There's a big expectation from, I say younger, I don't want to stereotype, but there is this big expectation that the employer will pay for everything. Everything's done in work time, and we can't keep doing that and cutting costs and increasing our costs
Professional
everywhere.
development means that. My daughter's a doctor, she's a paediatrician. I wouldn't expect that she would not keep up to speed with the latest drugs. If you were to go in and you've got a child who is ill, you wouldn't want her not to know it, would you? You have an expectation. I'm going to switch the subject for our last subject. We've gone through a lot today. The IPPR had a report. It was on the front page of some newspapers newspapers, and it was about the northern economy, and they got some stats that suggest that it has the second lowest level of investment among advanced economies. If this north of England was a country, Greece would be only the only OECD nation to see less public and private investment, and the UK ranks 35th out of 38th in OECD countries in terms of receiving investment. And it was a bit of a doom and gloom stats-based report bringing back the concept of north-south divide. Now, Emily, you don't live in the north, so I'd be very interested in your point of view as an observer. The three of us do. I won't give my opinion yet. What about you? You're active in Redcar.
Yep.
What do you think about this report? Does it chime with your experience?
I think that it's really difficult. I think that it's an unfair report to kind of compare a part of a country to a whole country. You could do that for any country and you could still come up with comparable stats. Yeah. So I think the article's quite flawed from that perspective. However, North East traditionally is kind of like has been underinvested. Have to go back in history. It was an area that was relied upon a lot of manufacturing, kind of like the steel industry, which we don't really have like now. But we are moving quite a lot into digital services. We've got some great places like here, Digital City, and also up in Newcastle. So we are starting to see like the positive effects of that. So, and I have to say, because I'm kind of chair of the Redcar Town deal, that we've had the levelling up investment. I know there's been a lot of bad press about that, but there are some positive things. And what the press don't understand is that these projects take time. They're not things that you just don't do overnight. They take years. We all know how long it takes to get planning permission through just to get something on the side of a house, let alone for a regeneration of a town.
And what about your deal went through?
Absolutely. Redcar got the full 25 million investment, and we've got some of our projects going to be going live this year.
And it strikes me that in the Levelling Up announcement, which was last week, there were a lot of people, organisations or places rather, that won their grants, like Redcar, but there were some that didn't. And the ones that didn't got all the airtime, got all the whinging on the front page of our local newspaper was the County Durham didn't get any. It's fair that they had their say, but the ones that did. The other thing I was going to ask you, Darren, you run a smaller business, I run a small business. Yeah. I wonder to what extent, because we're sat in a TV studio that I built during the lockdown, it cost a lot of money. You're investing in your technology and your people. Are these investments, which are micro investments, they all add up though, don't they?
They do. And that it's really difficult for businesses to take the plunge, and that's what I had to do the last 2 years. I've taken a big plunge and invested all the time, resources of the business into developing resources into training, into AI, business analysis, IT, because that's what I could see the whole general trend moving. That's what businesses need. That's what the global economy needs. The upshot of that, just to give a bit of big news, is that we did a trade deal with the Indonesian government, and we had a delegation of university staff from Indonesia come to Redcar and get training in AI.
That's exporting know-how.
Absolutely.
It's not a commodity, but it is, because you've commoditised it.
Absolutely.
That's a story, isn't it? And we need to get him on GB News to talk about this. Emily, what's your take, having observed this little bit of the discussion from the London perspective?
Well, I'm glad Darren pointed out that you can't really compare one region of the UK or, a couple of regions of the UK to whole countries. It does skew it slightly. But it is true that the government seems to maybe have been a bit disproportionate in terms of the money that's given to the South out of these levelling up funds. It was in the papers that the government had been funneling a little bit too much money towards some of the Tory seats that they wish to retain in the next election. So perhaps that's a little bit unfair. I mean, the government have pointed to, of course, free ports in various areas. They've pointed to billions of pounds of investment in various infrastructure projects. And also they want to devolve more power, as they've said, although I'm a bit sceptical about that. I'm not sure I want more mayors. I'm not particularly a fan of those. But It's hard to say. I mean, I think transport's a massive one. I don't think that the government should have gone ahead with HS2. I think more intercity networks would probably be better suited for people so that you can create more hubs. I mean, I think it is a shame that so many people move away from the north to come down south just because they see them more opportunities or more opportunities to have very high paid salaries down here. I don't really know what you do about it. I'm not sure that big redistribution of wealth is the answer from south to north. I like the idea of investment zones, but they seem to have been kicked down the road by Rishi Sunak and Jeremy Hunt. So I'm not really sure what the answer is to levelling up, but if this assessment is even a bit true, it is a bit damning.
Well, whenever you want to come up north, I'll show you around and I'll show you some of it in action. But thank you very much. Emily, you're always great value. Thank you for coming on. Nicky, thank you. Darren, thank you. That's Business Unmuted for today. We'll be back next week at the same time. Follow us on different platforms and subscribe and like. Thank you very much.